The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you may be and whenever it may be. Welcome to another edition of Ask Claire on the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. If you have found this program by design, you know that my name is Claire Hall. I am a resident of Newport, Oregon. I am a county commissioner. I am a passionate fan of baseball, books, and good writing of all kinds, baseball history, but I've got wide-ranging interests. And when Ralph Tycho said, I want you to do a program on my network, I said, can I talk about absolutely anything and everything? And he said, yes. And so here I am with one of my dearest Facebook friends who I look forward to someday meeting in person. He's a man who defies simple or easy description, and I mean that in a good way. But Scott Russell, thank you for being on the program. Welcome.
My pleasure. And Ralph Tycho, of course, is inclusive of everything, I believe. So there's nothing that's going to be excluded as far as any opinions stated.
Yeah. And so, you're a guy who I think maybe you can do it, but just in a few sentences for people who haven't had the pleasure yet, tell us who Scott Russell is and what he's all about.
Boy, that's a darn good question. I wish I had an answer for it.
Yeah, you've been
seriously,
trying to figure that out. Yeah.
I was a baseball statistician for a number of years. I was probably responsible for this modern-day insanity, which is the analytical age of baseball. And I apologize profusely to everyone because of that. I was the first one, actually, in the 1970s, even before Bill James, to create statistics about the effect of artificial turf on batting averages. And I had no intent. My only intent, actually, was I was trying to explain why my dear friend Bill Spaceman Lee of the Boston Red Sox had a higher earner average when he played on artificial turf. Unfortunately, when Peter Gammon started printing my statistical reports in both the Boston Globe and in the Sporting News, people actually began to take me seriously for some strange reason, which was their mistake. And then the age of analytics came in. And now you can't watch a baseball game without being assaulted by analytics. I believe that the analytics are very useful, except they must be combined with old school scouting and old school methods and procedures, which are now pretty much ignored, unfortunately. So again, I apologize. As far as what else I do these days, I'm a writer of sorts. Mm-hmm. I've written 4 books, 2 very statistical, silly books on the Boston Red Sox, one called Too Much Time on His Hands, which was followed up by Still Too Much Time on His Hands. And those were the actual titles of the book. And then in my old age, I started to write, and I decided to do a biography of one of my heroes, Joey Giardello, who was the former middleweight champion of the world, who led an incredibly interesting life. Joey's real name was Carmine Tellelli. He was born in Brooklyn, New York, and he was a big Brooklyn Dodgers fan, by the way.
Oh, cool.
And Joey Giardello knew that there was a better life in store for him somewhere other than the streets of Brooklyn. And at the age of 15, he decided he was going to join the Army. Only one problem is, at the age of 15, you cannot join the Army. His name then was Carmine Tellelli, so he purchased a birth certificate. And the birth certificate, which I believe was either $3 or $5, my memory fails me, and the birth certificate had the name Joseph Giardello, and that's how he became Joey Giardello. And the rest is history. But most recently, I've written a book. It's a novel. It's an apolitical novel which I think is important in these days of overwhelming intolerance, and that goes on both sides. I just feel that both sides have lost their minds, and that's the problem with sides. Sides have a tendency to be extreme, and that was my cat, by the way. You're liable to get some felines speaking on this. But
I took it as a cry of approval for what you were saying.
I'm not particularly too sure. I believe that was Bobo, complaining that Soxy was getting attention from my long-suffering bride Peg of the last 34 years, and he wasn't getting any attention. So if you hear any screaming, eventually it'll be some sort of histrionics and fisticuffs between two male cats. But at any rate, getting back to the novel I mentioned, recently, it was November of last year it was released. And it's an apolitical novel called Prophet's End, which is Prophet End. It's apolitical. And as I said, in this age of total intolerance on both sides, I think both sides have lost their minds. Everything these days is so partisan, it's ridiculous. Bipartisanship has gone out the window, and so has common sense. But that's just my opinion.
Well, can I say briefly that I share, I know you're on a roll, my friend, but I share that opinion, and unfortunately, again, I think both sides, the extremes at both sides now punish collaboration. They no longer endorse collaboration. They think working towards compromise and moving ahead on issues is treated as evil, and therefore anybody who tries to go to the middle gets punished from both sides. And that, to me, is one of the main reasons we've got such horrid gridlock right now.
Exactly, Claire. Exactly. And I can tell you that those in the middle, who may or may not identify themselves as libertarians. Unfortunately, a lot of the alleged libertarians these days are actually either people on the left who are posing as being in the middle, or people on the right who are posing as being in the middle to hide their true intentions. But the true libertarians are getting caught in the crossfire. But getting back just briefly to Prophet's End here, this novel.
And not briefly, because I want to talk more about this magical, wonderful book and give you all the time you want and need.
Thank you so much. But I can tell you, too, that as I said, it's apolitical, and I just felt it was important to do something apolitically these days because of all the intolerance that's going on. And this book, I grew up in New York City, so obviously I was deeply impacted by 9/11 and the aftermath of 9/11. And as I said, it's an apolitical tale. It was released in November of 2017. And the story is based on actual events and is dedicated to my idol, who happens to be the great columnist, novelist, and journalist Pete Hamill. In fact, Mr. Hamill is a chief character in the tale. Prophet's End is also dedicated to first responders. And as I said, I'm a native New Yorker as well as an old Brooklyn Dodgers fan, and impacted, tremendously by the events of 9/11 and the aftermath. Prophet's End was also inspired by an impossibly beautiful young woman named Jen Bricker. The character Jen Swanson in Prophet's End is based directly on the real Jen Bricker. The actual Jen is the greatest combination of faith, hope, compassion, courage, and otherworldly beauty that exists on our planet. I'm a dreamer. Not going to deny that. I'm a dreamer. And it is my dream that Prophet's End be adapted into a motion picture, one in which only Jen Bricker could possibly play the lead romantic role. I literally wrote Prophet's End with Jennifer in mind. She would stand Hollywood on its not-so-respective heads. And keep in mind, I didn't say left-wing heads, right-wing heads. They're not-so-respective heads. So let's get out of the way. The real Jen Bricker was born without legs, and yet she is not handicapped, not in the least. and she would forever change the perceptions of tens of millions of movie watchers. And yes, Prophet's End is a tale of hope and faith even in the rubble of despair. I actually attempted to reach Jen some time ago when I began writing with her in mind. The impact she has had on my life is extraordinary. Truthfully, Claire, I wasn't expecting a response, but I received one within minutes. But it was what she said that nearly brought me to tears. Jen responded, "It's really amazing how much of me you truly see. It's a blessing."
Wow.
And so at that point I said, there are angels on this planet, and she is obviously one of them. I couldn't respond, by the way. I was too choked up, and God, she's gorgeous, too.
Yes. So pictures of Jen Bricker, and I must share that opinion.
Yeah, she's amazing. She's an amazing young woman. And this gets really interesting now. So I wrote Prophet's End, which, of course, Pete Hamill is actually a character in the book. He's a chief character in the book, as you know. And get this, Peg and I, my wife and I, were vacationing in Bar Harbor, Maine, approximately, 5 weeks ago, Peg? About that, 5 weeks ago. And we were hiking there's Bobo. There's Bobo speaking again. But Bobo, by the way, just briefly on my cat, I think some of the listeners would get a kick out of this.
Sure.
I'm going to interject something in the middle of this about Bobo.
Okay.
Bobo is a lot like me, a lot like I am, and we were going away to Ogunquit, Maine, approximately sometime in June for a 3-day weekend. Now, Bobo, who's this silly 5-year-old male, is very outgoing. Very outgoing. He loves everyone. He doesn't have an enemy in the world, except for his brother, Soxy, but that's another story. So no matter what closet that Peg opens up in the house, Bobo must enter the closet. So, and at least 5 or 6 times a day I hear Peg saying, "Bobo, get out of the closet." Well, the problem is, as we're heading up to Ogunquit, Maine, that 3-day weekend, which comprised like 3 days, two evenings, Peg opened up a closet she seldom uses, and it's in the living room where she stored some of her summer clothing. Unbeknownst to her, Bobo got by Border Patrol. Somehow he snuck into the closet without Peg even knowing about it.
Okay.
And here we are. We're going out the door, and I normally account for all my cats because they're all indoors. None of them go out. We have 4 cats. So that night, our cat sitter leaves us a message. Bobo did not come over for his usual belly rub.
Uh-oh.
Now, that's interesting. That's a strange message. I said, he was probably asleep or whatever. That was on Friday night. Saturday night, we get another message from Celia, our cat sitter, who says, "Bobo, I haven't seen Bobo. Seen the other 3. Bobo hasn't come over for his usual belly rub." I said, something's wrong here. Well, that Sunday morning we came home. And, of course, Bobo was in the closet for 2 days and 3 nights. I'm sorry, 2 nights, 3 days. And so I'm calling Bobo. We got home on Sunday, and I'm saying, "Bobo, Bobo," nothing. Finally, I hear this little squeak out of the closet in the living room. Well, there's Bobo. I opened the door. I said, "Peg, I think you locked Bobo in the closet for the last 3 days." And
oh, my.
Claire, I can't make this up. I opened the closet door. I opened the closet door, and Bobo came out, and so help me, he had a sheepish look on his face.
Wow.
The first thing he did is he went over to his food dish and he ate quite a bit.
Sure.
Then he walked over to the water dish and took a long drink.
Okay.
I cannot make this up. He then walked over and asked to go back into the closet. As I said, the cat takes after me. He's a complete nitwit.
Yeah.
He's an imbecile.
It's kind of cozy in there, private. It's dark, but my eyes work good in there. I can almost see it.
Yes, Claire, this cat is a total imbecile, and he's very social, and that's the strange part about it. You tell people about this, and they think, well, you're abusing your pet. No, we're not. He's just a moron. Speaking of politicians and congressmen, so Bobo would be a congressman. No, he's not a bad guy. So, but at any rate, so as they began saying about Prophet's End.
Yes.
It was back in June, mid-June, and Peg and I were vacationing in Bar Harbor. I'm sorry, this is September. I'm sorry. Mm-hmm. This is 5 weeks ago in September. We're up in Bar Harbor, Maine for about a full week, about 8 days. Mm-hmm. And we're hiking in Acadia National Park. Mm-hmm. And as I told you, the book is dedicated to first responders. Mm-hmm. Prophet's End. And Peg and I had hiked Jessup Path. We had hiked Jordan Pond. And then we parked our car near Sand Beach in preparation of walking the cliffs around the beach. Mm-hmm. This is when I noticed an attractive young couple walking towards us. They looked really athletic, these two. Mm-hmm. Young man was wearing a New York Mets jersey. Mm-hmm. It looked official, and it had number 17 on it. The great former Mets first baseman Keith Hernandez wore number 17, so it was pretty obvious to me that this young man was honoring the current Mets player, or the former Mets player and current broadcaster. The young man's lovely wife also had on what appeared to be an official Mets jersey. Mm-hmm. Therefore, Claire, you know this. We New Yorkers are ball busters. Am I allowed to say that on the air?
Yeah. I mean, this is internet radio. It's not, we're past the days of the 7 forbidden words.
Yep.
All of that.
Yep.
Yeah,
definitely.
Sure.
We won't forget the late great George Carlin on here. Speaking of apolitical people, but all of New Yorkers are ball busters. It's not only intrinsic, but it's a trait I actually find admirable, truthfully. Well, as this young couple approached us in the parking lot at Sand Beach, I called out, "Yo, Keith, you guys take a wrong turn somewhere? You lost? Rough year, no?" And I was, of course, alluding to the rather lousy Mets season the Mets just had. Mm-hmm. They both laughed. This young couple laughed, and we began a conversation. And we were quite comfortable with them, and they seemed comfortable with us. We discussed the Mets and the fact that I was originally a New Yorker. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. However, the man, who ended up being named Don Stern, threw me off with a Southern accent. He had a Southern accent. Here he is with Mets garb and everything else. I'm wondering, what the heck now? Eventually, Don asked what I did. I informed him I was a writer of sorts and that I had recently written a novel dedicated to first responders. His facial expression completely changed as soon as I said that. Don informed me that he had many friends who were police and firefighters. Since I was merely a few feet from our car, I opened the trunk, and I pulled out a copy of Prophet's End and personalized it to both Don and the young lady who is his wife, Pam. And I wrote, "To Don and Pam, follow your dreams." And I signed it. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't until Peg and I returned home the following week that I realized just how special our chance meeting with the young couple was. A message awaited us at home.
Okay.
I think I have a copy of it here. Yep. And here it is verbatim. And it is. Dear Mr. Russell, it was a pleasure meeting and talking with you and your wife last week in Acadia National Park. As promised, my wife Pam and I each read your book in the flights home this past Saturday, and we both enjoyed the story very much. There were a lot of things in your book that I could relate to very closely. The awesome Sandy Amoro's catch in the left field of Game 7 in 1955. because of the stories about the Dodgers my dad used to tell me. The Miracle Mets of '69, and sadly, 9/11. A good friend of mine that I graduated Massapequa High School, New York, with in 1977, lost two cousins with the fire department in the collapse. He said, please Google the Tower of Freedom 9/11 Military Monument, located in John J. Burns Park in Massapequa, New York. My buddy Frank Haskell built it in remembrance of his cousins and all branches of the military and victims of 9/11. I visited it last year, and it is beautiful. Frank is a retired fire department, New York. Your book touched me in a way that makes me believe our meeting in Maine was not one of chance, but one of fate, and for that I am thankful. Thank you again for the book, and may God bless you, sir. It is signed, Captain Don R. Stern, Assistant Fire Marshal, City of Tulsa, Oklahoma Fire Department.
Wow.
So very powerful, and I've seen so many things since I wrote this book, so many signs that I wrote this for a reason. And of course, as I said, the book not only pays homage to firefighters, first responders, of course, Pete Hamill, Jen Bricker. So that meant a lot to me. That meant a lot.
Fantastic. Yes. Yes. It's moments like that you believe that whether you believe in God, the universe, whatever kind of higher power, you know that there is something beyond random chance guiding a lot of things that happen in our life.
No question.
Yeah.
Yeah, no question about that. And so that really shook me up. And so now here is Pete Hamill, which brings up another completely different story. I attempted to contact Pete Hamill since he's not only a character in the book, but the book is dedicated to him and first responders. And this was about last year, of course, and I was having difficulty reaching Mr. Hamill. And it was kind of frustrating because I had no idea why I was having difficulty reaching him, and it was almost as if the people I contacted, who were his publishers, representatives, whatever, had placed some sort of protective cocoon around him. And I had no idea why. And then finally, I read where Mr. Hamill, who was 80 years old at the time, he's 82 or 83 now, had fallen in New York City, his home in New York City, and broken both his hips simultaneously. And then I started thinking the worst. I said, oh, my God, what if, and you have to remember something about Pete Hamill. When he wrote for the New York Post and the New York Daily News and Long Island Newsday and just wrote his incredible columns and his wonderful novels, that he was so active, and he would go all over, he would travel all over New York by foot. In fact, Pete didn't even get his driver's license until he was 36 years old.
Oh, wow.
So I could just imagine how devastating that must have been to him to have broken both hips at that age.
Sure.
And so I'm moving away from Bobo, who's singing right now. So at any rate, I still could not reach Mr. Hamill. And then one day I was online, and I saw an old video of Pete speaking, Mr. Hamill speaking at Glucksman Ireland House on the campus of NYU in New York City. And I said, okay, that's interesting. And of course, Glucksman Ireland House in New York City is where the students from Ireland, that's their fraternity at NYU.
Okay.
And I figured this might be worth a shot. Let me attempt to call Glucksman Island House and see if they have any in to Pete Hamill. I mean, the video is about 4 years old. So I called, and a woman named Miriam answered. Miriam Nyhan Gray, and she was quite cordial. And I prefaced my remarks by saying that this call is going to be very unusual. And she says in this lovely Irish brogue, trust me, we get very unusual calls on a daily basis. And I informed her that Mr. Hamill was my idol, and that I had written a book in which case he was not only a character in the book, but the book was dedicated to him. And I was very frustrated in attempting to reach him, and I was afraid because I had also learned of his unfortunate accident, and I feared the worst. She immediately realized what I was inferring at that point. She says, because I was thinking, my God, does he have dementia or God knows what? First of all, she said, I speak to Peter. She called him Peter. A couple of times a week, and I can assure you that he has his full faculties, and that if you send me a copy of the book, I will see to it that he receives it.
Fantastic.
So that was several months ago. Yeah. And of course, since he was so sweet about it, I sent Miriam a copy of the book too and personalized it to her, thanking her.
Oh, excellent.
Well, a few months go by.
Okay.
Nothing. I don't hear a thing. So I'm figuring that, oh boy, well, I tried. And then all of a sudden, Miriam contacts me. And she says, Scott, since you're a huge fan of Peter's, would you be interested in attending a tribute to Peter this December? And this is this coming December. It's still about several weeks away.
Right.
And I said, my response was, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I will be meeting him. And now, if I may, if you have a couple of more minutes, I will now tell you that I have this incredible trepidation about meeting Mr. Hamill, and I will explain.
Okay.
It was back in the mid-'70s that I had a dear friend who used to pitch for the Boston Red Sox and Montreal Expos, and at the time he was a Boston Red Sox pitcher, Bill Spaceman Lee, quite a character. Bill, in fact, just ran for governor of Vermont last year. He lost, of course, but his goal was to get more votes than his lifetime earner average was. That was his goal.
Was he successful in that?
Believe it or not, no.
Oh, no.
Yeah. However,
I lived in Massachusetts. I would have voted for the Spaceman.
Well, he was running in his state of Vermont, where he now lives.
Oh, Vermont. I'm sorry. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Vermont. So, but
okay.
At any rate, back in the mid-'70s, one of the things that our friendship was based on was our mutual respect and admiration for the great novelist Kurt Vonnegut Jr. Kurt Vonnegut, great writer, obviously.
Yes.
And one day, Kurt Vonnegut, I learned, was going to be speaking at the Boston Globe Book Festival.
Oh, my.
So I called Bill up and I said, Bill, you interested in joining me? He said, count me in. Okay. Well, here we are, Billy and I going over to see Kurt Vonnegut speak at the Boston Globe Book Festival. And we sat there enthralled listening to Vonnegut for 45 minutes.
Wow.
Vonnegut was just absolutely just wonderful. The man was one of the greatest speakers I've ever heard in my life. And we were enthralled. At the end of the 45-minute speech by Vonnegut, he had just written a novel called Timequake. And they made an announcement on the loudspeaker. For all of you who want to meet Mr. Vonnegut, he'll be out in the corridor signing copies of his new book, timequake. It'll be a meet and greet. So please just line up outside in the corridor and meet Mr. Vonnegut.
Oh, wow.
So I said excitedly to Bill Lee, I said, hey, let's go over it. Let's see Kurt Vonnegut. My God. And Bill Lee shocked me.
Mm-hmm.
Bill Lee shocked me. He looked at me and he said, Scotty, tell you what, I'll meet you outside. I said, what do you mean you're going to meet me outside? Don't you want to meet Vonnegut? And Bill looked at me and said something which I did not understand then, but now, some 43 years later, I now understand it. Bill looked at me and said, I'd rather leave my idols at a distance.
Yeah. Yeah.
And here I am on the verge of meeting Pete Hamill.
I know. My gut, my heart tells me you're not going to be disappointed, my friend, but you're going to have to tell me all about it, privately, and then maybe that's another show all in itself.
Definitely. And the reason the trepidation, everything else, as you know, because you're a writer.
Sure.
All writers are insecure.
Sure.
There isn't a writer in the world who isn't insecure.
Oh, yeah. It goes with the territory. Yes. But,
so,
oh, my gosh, yeah.
So my feeling is, what if Hamill read the book and thought it sucked?
I think he's probably gracious enough that, he probably wouldn't be dishonest, but he wouldn't say, hey there, Scott, great to meet you. That book you so nicely sent me and dedicated to me and made me a major character in, I got to tell you, it really sucked. Or no. He'd say something like, I am so honored. It's such a pleasure to meet you. And it's gonna be great. It's gonna be one highlight in a life that has been filled with remarkable experiences.
Well, I certainly hope so. I am looking forward to it, but as I said, I'll be nervous as hell going in. And, of course, for folks who don't know or not aware, Prophet's End is also my beloved Brooklyn Dodgers are featured in Prophet's End.
Yes, and especially 1955 World Series and Sandy Amoros and The Catch. And I hate to say it, Scott, we're running out of time, so maybe one final thing from you is if people want to buy a copy of Prophet's End, where, how? What's the easiest way to track it down?
The best way to do it, a few ways. One is directly through Dorrance Publishing Company. They're my publishers. And also it's also available on Amazon.
Okay.
And through Barnes & Noble. Okay. But I can even do something better than that. And anyone who would like a personalized copy, they can contact me at the following email address. Okay. But make sure in the description on the email that they put in either Prophet's End or just book as part of the description, because otherwise it might go to spam. There's so much going on with computers these days, as you know. But they can actually forward me an email, tell me they're interested in purchasing the book, and my email address is S as in Scott, Russell, RUSSELL 37, that was Bill Lee's number, by the way, at Verizon.net. S. Russell 37 at Verizon.net. The book is only $12, and I would pay shipping and handling. So at any rate, thank you very, very much, Claire, for this opportunity. I look forward to speaking with you soon. Okay. And hopefully we didn't offend too many people today.
Well, hey, if we didn't offend somebody, we're not doing what our job is, right?
Exactly. All right. Exactly. And in regards to Ralph Typo and Company.
Yeah, Scott Russell, raconteur, statistician, all-around Renaissance man, and a heck of a great guy. Proud to call him friend. Thank you for joining us today on Ask Claire. And again, my go-to sign-off until I come up with something more original. Happy trails to you until we meet again.